This is the B-52, America's longest-serving bomber, and the machines rolling toward it are drums of cruise missiles, 8 to a rack, headed for its belly. Each drum is a rotary launcher. Sealed inside the weapons bay, it looks like a revolver. Rotate, release, rotate again. And the bomber it feeds first flew when Harry Truman was president. The U.S. Air Force still fields 76 of these bombers by its own count, and instead of retiring them, it's chosen to rebuild them from the inside out. 8 new engines, a new radar, and a new name. The plan is to keep it flying for 100 years. So today, while the crew arms this aircraft, we walk it end to end. Tail, engines, belly, nose. Because every stop explains why it refuses to die. Starting with, here the loading crew stands, down on the concrete, looking up. The full name is the Boeing B-52 Stratofortress, a long-range heavy bomber. It's a frontline combat aircraft on duty today. The tail rises 40 feet and 8 inches above the ramp, 4 stories. The fuselage runs just over 159 feet from nose to tail, and the wings stretch 185 feet from tip to tip, which is longer than the Wright brothers' entire first flight at Kitty Hawk. The numbers keep going like that. Loaded for takeoff, a B-52 weighs up to 488,000 pounds, enough to run a family car for more than a century. The Air Force's own fact sheet puts the unrefueled range at 8,800 miles, which is Louisiana to Australia without ever meeting a tanker. Into its weapons bay and onto its wing pylons, the bomber loads roughly 70,000 pounds of nuclear or conventional ordnance. That is more than the combined empty weight of 3 F-16 fighters. And the airframe is full of strange solutions. The wings are so long that they droop toward the ground when the fuel tanks are full. So Boeing fitted small outrigger wheels near the tips to protect them. On takeoff, as you can see here, the wings flex upward until those tip wheels simply lift off the runway on their own. The landing gear hides another oddity. All 4 main landing gear units can pivot up to 20 degrees, so in a strong crosswind, the B-52 lands crabbed, nose pointed one direction, wheels rolling another. It looks wrong from the ground. It works every time. A crew of 5 flies it, 2 pilots on the upper deck, and 2 navigators in a windowless compartment below them. Behind the pilot sits 1 electronic warfare officer facing backward, watching for threats they will never see. For its first 4 decades, there was a 6th seat too, a tail gunner. B-52 gunners hold the only bomber gun skills of the jet age. 2 MiG-21 shot down over Vietnam in December 1972, before the gunner station was retired in 1991. The aircraft cruises at 650 miles per hour at altitudes up to 50,000 feet, nearly 10 miles up. Its crew calls it the Buff, short for Big Ugly Fat Fellow, at least in polite company. Then come the engines, 8 of them, hung under the wings in 4 twin pods, just like these. Why 8? In the late 1940s, jet engines were so weak that lifting a bomber this size took every engine Boeing could hang, and modern airliners now cross oceans on 2. But this airframe was built around 8 so completely that changing the count means changing the aircraft. What hangs there today are 8 Pratt & Whitney TF-33 turbofans, every one built in the early 1960s, a living fossil of early jet power. The design itself was born absurdly fast. In October 1948, Air Force officials told a visiting team of Boeing engineers that their propeller-driven bomber proposal was already obsolete. So the team checked into a Dayton hotel and spent the weekend starting over. By Monday morning, they had a 33-page pitch for an 8-engine jet with swept wings, plus a display model carved from balsa wood bought at a local hobby shop. It may be the most productive hotel stay in aviation history. That weekend sketch became 744 aircraft built across 8 major versions between 1952 and 1962. And the fleet never stopped working. These airframes carried nuclear deterrence through the Cold War and flew combat over Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. A design that's older than NASA, still standing watch. Now walk back to the tail and look up at the black code painted on the fin, right here. The first 2 digits are the year the aircraft was ordered, and on every B-52 still flying, they read 60 or 61. All 76 survivors are the final version. The B-52H delivered in May of 1961 and October of 1962. Hold on to that second date. October 1962 is the month the last B-52 ever built rolled out of the factory in Wichita, Kansas. But the numbers on this tale are not the remarkable thing. The remarkable thing is what happened to every bomber that was ever built to replace it, all of them younger than this fin. The first replacement arrived while the B-52 was still in production. The Convair B-58 Hustler was everything the B-52 was not. A gleaming, delta-wing dart that flew at twice the speed of sound and collected a stack of world records doing it. It entered service in 1960. By January 1970, the entire fleet had been flown to Davis-Monthan in Arizona, the desert boneyard where America parks its retired aircraft. The Hustler cost roughly 3 times as much as a B-52 to operate, and of the 116 built, 26 were lost in accidents. Speed, it turned out, was a luxury the mission never actually required. The next idea was to go faster still. The North American XB-70 Valkyrie was designed to cruise at 3 times the speed of sound, 11 miles up, too high and too fast for any interceptor to touch. Then Soviet surface-to-air missiles turned altitude from a shield into a bullseye, and the program ended after just 2 prototypes. One of them was lost in a 1966 mid-air collision. During all of things, a publicity photo shoot. The bomber built for brute speed was obsolete before it was operational. Then came the survivors. The Rockwell B-1B Lancer entered service in 1986. Swing wings, supersonic dash, built to slip under enemy radar at treetop height. Just 100 were built and roughly 45 still fly today. And by the Pentagon's own fiscal 2026 rate tables, a B-1 flight hour runs $89,400 against the B-52's $66,000. The type even gave up its nuclear role under arms control agreements. The B-52 never did. The Northrop B-2 Spirit followed in 1997. The flying wing stealth bomber, nearly invisible to radar. Each one costs about $2 billion by the government's own accounting, which is why only 21 were ever made. Both are extraordinary machines, and both are now scheduled to retire before the aircraft they were meant to replace, handing their missions to the incoming B-21 Raider in the 2030s, while the B-52 flies on. The reasons are unglamorous, and that's exactly the point. The B-52 costs a fraction of its rivals to buy and fly. The Air Force's fiscal 2012 accounting puts it at $84 million per aircraft, 1/24th of a single B-2. It hauls more weapons farther than anything else in the inventory. Its plain aluminum skin needs none of the delicate coating care and climate-controlled hangars that stealth surfaces demand. And there's a hidden inheritance. Through much of the Cold War, the H models sat on ground alert with their engines off, waiting for a war that never came. Those quiet decades mean those 60-year-old airframes carry surprisingly young bones, with thousands of flight hours still banked in the structure. The bomber has watched its own kind die too. Under the START Arms Treaty, hundreds of retired B-52s were chopped into 5 pieces by a 13,000-pound guillotine blade and left lying in that same desert, so Russian satellites could count the carcasses from orbit. Yet the fleet that survived became irreplaceable. In 2015, the Air Force did something that had never been done before. It reached back into the boneyard, pulled out a B-52 nicknamed Ghost Rider after 7 years in the sun, and restored it to full frontline service to replace a fire-damaged jet. There's no factory to order more from. The desert is the only spare parts store left. Run those numbers side by side. 744 built, 76 still flying. And the Air Force is guarding the last 10% of a production run that ended before the Beatles reached America. Every time a replacement stumbled, the B-52 quietly absorbed the mission. Cruise missiles in the 1980s, precision bombs in the 2000s. Somewhere in those decades, the service stopped asking what could replace the B-52. It started asking what it would take to keep it. And the honest answer is hanging just ahead of you, under the wing. The one part of this aircraft that nobody could defend. Duck under the trailing edge and stand at the inboard pod, close enough to touch the cowling. These engines are dying, not of weakness, but of loneliness. Pratt & Whitney stopped building the TF-33 decades ago. Spare parts grow harder to find every year, and the Air Force predicted that the engine would become unsupportable by 2030. Not underpowered, not unsafe, simply impossible to keep supplied. The fix is called CERP, the Commercial Engine Replacement Program, and it is aimed squarely at the metal above your head. And the Air Force nearly fixed this a generation ago. In 1996, Rolls-Royce offered to re-engine the fleet on a lease arrangement. The service said no, and a later Defense Science Board review concluded the rejection rested on flawed cost math. What nobody in that 1996 meeting knew was that they had not killed the deal. They'd only postponed it. The same company would come back and win it at a price no one in that room would have signed. So in September 2021, the Air Force chose its replacement, the Rolls-Royce F130. The deal is worth up to $2.6 billion for more than 600 engines, 8 for every aircraft in the fleet, plus spares. The F-130 belongs to an engine family that has spent decades powering Gulfstream business jets with millions of flight hours behind it. The bomber that outlived every rival will cruise into its second century on the engines of corporate aviation. Genuinely a plot twist nobody sketched in 1948. Here's the detail that reveals the whole strategy. The F-130 produces roughly the same thrust as the TF-33 it replaces. The Air Force wasn't shopping for power. It was shopping for engines that never break. Why not swap 8 old engines for 4 big modern ones? The Air Force studied exactly that, and the answer lives in the tail. Lose 1 engine out of 8 on takeoff, and the aircraft barely notices. Lose 1 out of 4, and the surviving engines on the far wing shove the nose sideways, harder than the B-52's 1950s rudder design can catch. Fixing that would mean redesigning the tail, the wing, the pylons, the whole aircraft. 8 engines, same pods, same wing, no redesign. The upgrade survives by respecting the original design instead of fighting it. What the F-130 buys is straightforward. Rolls-Royce projects roughly 30% better fuel efficiency, which stretches an already intercontinental range and cuts the number of mid-air refuelings a mission needs. That matters more than it sounds, because in Pacific war planning, tankers are the scarce resource, not bombers. Every refueling the F-130 eliminates frees one of the hardest worked aircraft America owns. Stack the savings the way the program office does, 30% less fuel, times 8 engines, times 76 bombers, times 3 more decades of flying. On that math, the Air Force expects the new engines to largely pay for themselves. Digital controls will replace levers and gauges from the 1960s. New generators multiply the electrical power available for everything this rebuild adds later. And Rolls-Royce expects the engines to stay on the wing without a single overhaul for the rest of the aircraft's service life. The last engine change the B-52 will ever need. This is happening now. On May 4, 2026, the program passed its critical design review, the Pentagon's confirmation that the design is ready to build. Later this year, the first B-52H arrives at the company's San Antonio plant in Texas to have all 8 engines swapped, along with new pylons and nacelles shaped for the F-130, new generators, and new cockpit displays tied to the engines. Conversion of the full fleet runs deep into the 2030s, at an estimated bill of around $15 billion. And sooner or later, a tow tractor hooks onto the very jet above you for that same trip. The change will be even visible from the fence line. If you've ever seen a B-52 take off, you've seen the TF-33's trademark black smoke trail, the exhaust that has announced this bomber for 60 years. And the F-130 erases it. New engines settle how far this bomber flies and for how many more decades. They settle nothing about what it fights with. For that, walk aft between the main landing gear, because while you were under the wing, the drums from this morning arrived. Back here, the belly of the aircraft stands open, and the first drum is waiting beneath it, already armed. So what rolls up to the aircraft is a pre-packaged magazine. A hydraulic lift raises the whole assembly into the bomber's belly as one piece. And from the ground, you can watch 8 missiles vanish in seconds, slide in the drum, connect it, close the doors. The B-52 reloads less like an aircraft and more like a revolver. You don't feed it one round at a time. You drop in a loaded cylinder and shut the frame. For most of its life, that bay couldn't have used any of this. It was designed in the 1950s as a dumb space for gravity bombs, weapons that needed nothing but a door to fall through. When smart weapons arrived, they needed electrical power and guidance data, and the bay offered neither. So the precision arsenal hung outside on wing pylons. What the crews flying those missions didn't know was that the empty space above their heads was worth more than everything hanging off the wings. It just needed a wire. In 2013, the Air Force hired Boeing to fix that under the Internal Weapons Bay upgrade. The bay was wired with a standard military connection called Mil-Spec 1760, one interface carrying both power and targeting data to every weapon station. It's a USB port for high explosives. One plug, power and instructions down the same cable, and every weapon in the bay speaking the same language. That wiring feeds a piece of repurposed Cold War hardware. The drum is adapted from the strategic rotary launcher built in the 1980s, when B-52s needed to carry nuclear cruise missiles internally. That strategic version still flies with the AGM-86 nuclear missile today. The conventional rotary launcher holds 8 precision weapons, and it fixed an absurd bottleneck along the way. The bay's old wiring could feed power to only 4 weapons at a time. The launcher powers all 8 at once and keeps them all talking to the crew. And thanks to a communications refit called Connect, finished in the 2010s, crews can receive fresh targets by satellite and reprogram missiles from the cockpit mid-flight. When the moment comes, the drum rotates the chosen weapon to the release position, lets it fall into the airstream, and indexes the next round into place. In 2016, on the range at Edwards, a test crew dropped a JASSM out of the internal launcher for the first time, a weapon this bay had been physically incapable of carrying its entire life. The launcher raised the bomber's smart weapon capacity by 67%. 8 weapons inside joining 12 on the wings, making 20 precision weapons on one aircraft. And the passenger list is worth naming. First, the AGM-158B JASSM-ER, a stealthy cruise missile that navigates itself to targets more than 500 miles away, shaped and skinned to be hard for radar to spot. At about 2,250 pounds apiece, a full drum carries 9 tons of them. Second, the JDAM, the Joint Direct Attack Munition, an ordinary bomb with a satellite guidance kit bolted on to make it precise. And third, the ADM-160 MALD, a decoy that flies ahead of the strike and imitates an aircraft on enemy radar, with versions that can jam those radars outright. Add all of that up, and the launcher stops looking like a capacity upgrade. 20 weapons, each able to find its own way across hundreds of miles, mean the bomber never has to see its target or the defenses around it. It only has to reach a launch point, far outside their reach. The missile does the sneaking now. The bomber is just the truck. But a truck that shoots from that far away has to find targets from that far away. And the B-52 has been searching with eyes nearly as old as its engines. One stop still remains: the nose. So walk forward one final time, past the crew ladder to the very front of the aircraft. Under the black radome sits the last major organ from the original machine, a mechanically scanned radar, refined in the 1980s, but descended from the design logic era of vacuum tubes. Its antenna physically sweeps back and forth on motors, and it can only look at one thing at a time. Reliability has decayed along with it. Keeping the old set serviceable is, by the program office's own admission, one of the reasons the replacement exists at all. Its replacement, built by Raytheon under the Radar Modernization Program, is an AESA, an active electronically scanned array, designated the AN/APQ-188. Instead of one dish swinging on a motor, picture a fixed plate of hundreds of small transmitters, steering the beam electronically and re-aiming in fractions of a second. With no moving parts, there's far less to wear out or break, which means the headline feature of the biggest sensor upgrade in this bomber's life is that something finally stopped moving. It can track targets in the air and map the ground at nearly the same moment, including ships at sea for the maritime missions this bomber inherited. It's a fighter's radar, taught to think like a bomber's, derived from the sets flying today in the FA-18 and the F-15. For a standoff bomber, that radar is seeing half of the equation the launcher created, finding and fixing targets from far beyond the horizon, then handing them to missiles that do the traveling. The road has not been smooth. In May of 2025, the radar program tripped a significant Nunn-McCurdy breach, cost growth threshold that legally forces the Pentagon to go and explain itself to Congress. Unit cost had climbed from $2.3 billion to $2.6. The Air Force responded by trimming what the first version will do, switching some capabilities on later through software, according to the Pentagon's own testing reports. In December 2025, Boeing delivered the first radar-equipped test aircraft to Edwards, where flight testing continues alongside the engine work. By this July, the Government Accountability Office had the figure closer to $2.9 billion. Now step off the back nose, far enough to see the whole aircraft in one frame. The first full view since the ramp this morning. The engines alone are enough, but by the Air Force's own budget language, the moment a B-52H is fitted with the F130s, it stops being an H. The Air Force will redesignate the rebuilt aircraft the B-52J, the first new version letter in over 60 years. A new arsenal is waiting for it too. That includes the AGM-181 long-range standoff weapon, the stealthy nuclear cruise missile in development to succeed the AGM-86 you just met in the Bay. The J is not a patched-up survivor. It is the aircraft the United States plans to fly into the 2050s. Now, the date on the tail comes due. Remember October 1962, the month the last B-52 ever left the factory in Wichita? The airframes from that final production run are the very ones being rebuilt today, including the one in front of you. Do the math from Wichita forward. If they fly into the 2050s as planned, their service stretches forward a full century, longer than any combat aircraft in history. For more stories like this one, check out this video on the new upgrades to the B-52 Spirit. Bye for now.